Hi there, my name is Marissa, and I hear we have questions, so let's talk about it. One question that was posed to me is addiction a disease or is it a choice? And that's a really hard question because there's a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings and a lot of science behind it. So, especially for loved ones who have a person in their life who had time or currently is in active use, it's so tough because they are actively doing things every day that are harmful to the family and harmful to that person too. And it's terrifying to watch that person go through that experience and deal with the hurt and pain that they do. And they're making choices during their active use where it could drain finances, it could put people in danger and even themselves in danger. And so that part is really tough. The other piece, though, is that with it being a disease, people noting I couldn't help it, it was a disease. It almost feels like a lack of responsibility towards choices that were made during active use. And so let's talk about it. So, science shows that addiction is a disease. Chemicals mess with how your brain works, and alcohol and drugs, they mess with the chemicals that are in your brain. They can release or stop producing certain chemicals. And so that then creates issues for the brain because they either produce too much of a chemical, they don't produce enough of a chemical, and then that affects how we feel and the choices that we make throughout our day. The big piece is that the neurotransmitters are very important. And so when it's being told, hey, produce more of this, or hey, don't produce more of that, then it's not going to because it's getting these signals from the chemicals that are being put in bodies. And so that inherently goes towards the disease model of addiction being a disease. However, there is also a choice involved. And that first choice to use sometimes can be that last free will choice that a person makes, because that's all it takes at times for a person to get into the throes of addiction is one choice, one drink, one use. And so there's where it intersects together, where the disease and the choice happens. Now, let's also look at the role of external and sometimes even internal things and how that process even began, where it becomes a disease quicker or because of external forces that a choice is made. And a lot of times an uninformed choice is made as well. A lot of times people don't wake up in the morning and decide, today's the day I'm going to ruin my life. Nobody consciously thinks that. However, through one choice, 1 minute, 1 second, life can change forever. And so one way that it was explained to me in a way that I truly enjoy is the web. What strands of a spider web have led to that person getting in active use and staying in active use? And so let's explore that a little bit. Some things could be the role of genetics. It is shown that if a person has family members that have experienced addiction, it is more likely for that person. And why? Because that is just the way the brain is hardwired. An example is depression. So if your body is not producing enough dopamine, that is something that can go down from generation to generation, where the brain just doesn't produce as much dopamine. And so that leads to depression happening. That person is genetically created to be more susceptible to depression and for depression to even happen without an event happening in their life. Same thing with addiction. Their brains are maybe more wired to be susceptible to brainwave changes or to choose to stay in that cycle of active use. Now, other things that could affect it. Some are people, places, things. One of the key hallmarks is what are you surrounding yourself with? Some people have choices in who they surround themselves with, who their friends are, where they choose to spend their free time. But a lot of that sometimes isn't chosen. Some examples of this might be school or work or even a neighborhood that a person lives in. You don't get to choose who your neighbors are, who your classmates are, or sometimes even who your coworkers are. And because of that lack of choice, it can be surrounding with people who are maybe making bad choices for themselves or people more susceptible to offer bad choices onto others, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly. A lot of people take friends' recommendations when they say, hey, this drink will help you get through the day better. Or, hey, have you tried this? And next thing you know, because that choice was made, whether it was fully informed of what would happen, or even uninformed of what would happen. That choice has been made, and now that spiral of addiction has been occurring. Another piece is trauma. Sometimes trauma causes pain in us, and a lot of times the body doesn't like to be in pain. When the brain is hardwired for survival, the brain is going to do what it needs to for our survival. And so things like breathing, it happens naturally, and it knows it's necessary for our survival. Well, the body also knows that being in pain is not good for our survival. They know something's wrong if we're in pain. So it's going to choose to not be in pain. And so if a substance, if a drink helps that person not be in pain, even if it's superficially, and even if it's not a good long-lasting solution, the brain's not thinking that. The brain's like, not pain. So it's going to hit the button for a person to choose not pain, or choose the way that they avoid pain, whether or not they recognize that this is a good long-term solution for me or not. And so that's where especially cravings come in, is if it's producing chemicals, if it's producing certain sensations, the body wants that, and the body wants more of it. And then that tolerance happens, and so now you need more and more and more to produce those same level of feelings as what you had before. Other things are examples of adverse childhood experiences. Those with less protective factors of, positive adult role models, academic achievement, involvement in extracurricular activities. Those are some things that we consider protective factors. If a person doesn't have that, or they've experienced difficult life circumstances, they can be more susceptible to addiction than someone who had more protective fixtures in their lives growing up. So those are just a few examples of some of the pieces of the web that can get somebody stuck. So while that initial choice may have happened to use, those factors keep them stuck in that cycle. The last piece is, okay, what now? What's nice is, even though addiction is that mix of a choice or choices and the genetic piece, the disease aspect of it, recovery is a choice. And recovery is a choice that somebody's making every day to be the best version of themselves. And so while the brain suffers immense damage during active use, it also is capable of healing. And that's the real takeaway from all of this, is even though a choice and even though a disease can factor in to difficult life circumstances for someone in staying in addiction, that choice to invest in recovery is something that it should be commended for that human, because it is not an easy choice. It is a terrifying choice for them, because it's new and it's different, and it can be scary for them as well. And so with the right encouragement, with the right support, with the right accountability, and with the right programming in place to help teach the skills and abilities necessary for someone to live a productive, sober life, recovery is possible. So thank you for talking about it.